Shake hands and come out fighting, or skip the formalities and just come out fighting. The UAW talks get underway. And from aid for Ukraine to fraught political tensions at home, what a time to be in Congress. John James gives us his 6-month takeaways. Today is Sunday, July 16, 2023, and this is Flashpoint. Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. Good to have you with us this Sunday morning. The negotiations between the United Auto Workers and the big three automakers are always consequential, always rather dramatic. But the new round getting underway right now feels like a step up in weight class. A few weeks ago, the new UAW President Shawn Fain was here on Flashpoint, sounding very much like a man wanting to set a new course for the union and the negotiations. And last week, he decided to skip that long-held tradition of the ceremonial pre-talk handshake, saying he'll shake hands when there's a fair deal on the table. Is that bluster and posturing, or a real threat of serious economic upheaval in Michigan? Well, the fact that we're not really sure means right now it is exactly where the UAW wants it. We're going to talk about that this morning. We're also going to check in with Michigan Republican Congressman John James. He's now been in Congress for 6 months. From fighting for Selfridge to the news that the entire Michigan Republican delegation is throwing its support behind a candidate swarmed by legal trouble and who seemed to cause trouble for Michigan Republicans in the last election. We'll talk about all that and more today on Flashpoint. All right, Congressman John James coming up for a conversation in just a little bit, but let's start things off with strike talk. No, not Hollywood, though certainly everybody's talking about that, but will the UAW join the strike parade? Let's talk that over with Sandy Barua, CEO of the Detroit Regional Chamber. Daniel Howes is here, business columnist for the Detroit News, and Dr. Jeff Reitmer from the Global Supply Chain Management School at Wayne State University. Great to have you all here. Daniel, I've talked to you a couple of times now as we've watched the build up to this. And you've pointed out a number of times, and I think that this is really the conversation that's going on everywhere, is nobody really knows what to make of Shawn Fain, right? He's sort of an unknown, which means advantage UAW.
Absolutely. I think they understand that they've got the industry kind of on their back foot. I get calls just about every day from somebody at one of the companies. Did you hear what Shawn said? Did you hear that? and I say, sometimes I'll say no, but they clearly understand they have an advantage. In fact, I talked to one of his people who chuckled, and when I said that people don't know what to make of you guys in this town, and then the response was, well, maybe that is to our advantage. And I think we're seeing that in the early going. I mean, to say, we're not going to do a handshake. And everybody was flabbergasted. What do you mean you're not going to do a handshake? What does that say about the attitude you're bringing to the table? And he looks at it differently and says, I'll shake their hand when we have a good deal, when I perceive to be a good deal for our members.
Jeff, would you call that, is that theater, or did that handshake mean something to you too?
I think it's theater. I always thought it was theater.
Yep.
And I moved up here in 2000. So I didn't have a big reference to the auto industry until I came up here.
Well, now you've had 23 years of it.
Yeah, and I watch the handshake all the time, and I'm like, why bother? It's a show, and it's kind of like, okay, we're going to play nice, but we're not.
Well, a wise person once said to me, look at these talks as equal parts theater, politics, and economics.
Yeah.
And the economics come at the end, and right now we're in the theater and the political piece of it.
I can actually remember a hug when it was Sergio Marchionne a couple of years ago. So this is, I don't know
that
how
was kind of an infamous hug. Let's move on. Let's move on from that hug.
Fair enough. What's your worry level, though, for what we're watching?
I don't know if I can describe it as high enough. So first of all, I mean, theater does matter. I mean, it is clear that this generation of the UAW leadership took their charm and relationship building, talents from, the Donald Trump school of relationship building. And I think that matters because when you look at the last strike, the 2019 GM strike, 6 weeks, $4 billion, $2 billion just out of the automotive ecosystem alone. There's 150,000 UAW employees just with the big three, let alone the supply chain. So if they strike, and I haven't met anybody, an observer or anyone in the industry, who doesn't think that this is going to end up in some sort of strike. At least one, maybe multiple targets. What does that do? It idles that. It idles all of the suppliers, and all of the employment is in the supply base, frankly. And think of every bar, every convenience store, and then finally, we are just getting inflation under control. This, I think, is going to kick that can over.
Jeff, to the supply chain issue, that's your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
It's the massive part that people don't always think about first.
And normally, you saw it with the GM strike in 2019. All of them did a buildup. All of them put inventory. They can't do that this year. They still have shortages.
That's right.
So they can't pull stuff ahead, and they can't put that inventory out there so that they could sell it. And then there's also the question of, are the Teamsters going to cross the picket line to take it to a dealer? Yeah. So, and if it goes on for 6 weeks, it could really hurt the supply base.
So on a 1 to 10, Sandy seems to be at an 11. Where are you on believing that we're headed for strikes?
I'm there at 11, at least.
Daniel, it also seems, and this is part of where Sean Fain's different approach seems to be working, the outreach to the membership and engaging them with these Facebook Lives, being out there the day that the handshake was supposed to be happening. He said, I'd rather shake these hands. He seems to have a very willing, there's a reason why he got elected.
Exactly.
Right?
I was going to say, you have to give him credit and his people for doing what they say they were going to do, which is to listen to the membership, to talk with the membership, to understand what their concerns are, and then channel them in what he's saying publicly. And I think you can't deny that he's far more open than his predecessors. But where this ultimately leads, probably in a strike. I'm not as pessimistic. I don't think that there's going to be 3 strikes at 3 companies, but I could be surprised. I mean, we may be in uncharted territory here, but I do think we're in an environment in the industry that is not on the UAW side necessarily. I mean, we have competition in the electric vehicle space is unlike any competition this industry has ever seen. You have Tesla, you have you have startups. Now you have the Chinese, and the Chinese setting a different cost structure around the world, and that is a fearsome concern.
I was going to bring this up. This is where there is some relevance to what's going on in Hollywood. Sandy, they are trying to figure out this completely new model. It's streaming. What's AI going to do? This is a strike or a negotiation built around the same kind of transformative occurrences.
The technological shifts going on in both industries are different, but they are causing some of the same problems. Just in the U.S., we're investing over $200 billion in electrification. Now, I'm pretty confident that the market's going to be there for that, but no one really knows that. So when you look at our companies, one, right now they're paying about $65 an hour. Tesla's paying about $45 an hour. The transplants are, paying about $55. In Mexico, let's just say it's a fraction of any of those numbers, right? Daniel's exactly right. The battery electric pace is being set in China. Not just the cost structure, but the technology. They have such a lead on this.
This is what Jim Farley said recently. It's not up to us at the moment.
Right, exactly right. And let's face it, China's been drafting off of U.S. and Western technology for the last 30, 40 years. I think fair play is fair play. Let's start drafting off of them. And the only way we're going to get competitive on EVs. But to Daniel's point, this is such an uncertain environment. I mean, I think this is why the profit sharing model has worked. Because regardless what's happening in the industry, if the industry does well, the workers do well, and the industry does well. That's the model that we moved to, 15, 20 years ago, and we need to stick with it.
Jeff, Sean, though, makes the point that, yes, you can say that there's this upheaval, but you've got a whole bunch of people now who are expected to work on the line in a it now takes 2 years to be trained on a lot of the processes that run EVs. So it's not as simple as saying, well, this is easier.
Yeah. The number of parts that go into an EV are less.
Right.
But the technology is just far outpaces an internal combustion engine.
Well, I think the other thing you're going to see here is that in the near term and even the medium term, the pivot to electrification is leading to more jobs, more hourly jobs as they maintain production in their existing facilities, and then they add battery facilities around the country. You're going to see more jobs. The question is, we don't know where we're going to be in 2030 and beyond. To what extent we really make the turn to electrification, and then you're starting to close down a lot of those plants.
I'll let you all now, as we wrap this up, tell me which side has the better case. Jeff, on the one hand, we've got Shawn Fain saying, look, you keep bragging about all this money that you've made over these last couple of years. It's our turn. We gave you a lot back. On the other hand, you've got Jim Farley saying, China is stirring the drink now. They're deciding this, not us.
It's going to come down to economics. And they both need each other. And the one that figures that out first is going to be the winner. And I agree with most of what Shawn says. They've been getting the shaft for a long time.
Dan?
You know, I don't really want to pick who I think is going to be the winner.
Well, tell me, though, who you think has the better case.
Well, they both have good cases. I mean, I've had these conversations with
the best kind of negotiation.
Yeah, with executives at the companies, and you know, they complain about the fact that they're talking about $250 billion in profits, and then they talk about how they're lagging their peers and their margins aren't really very good, and I keep saying, but you understand, that doesn't matter. They're going to keep coming at it with about the raw dollars, and that's going to be the dance. But I do think they do need each other.
Sandy, the other element of this is that the UAW is not making inroads in a lot of places where these jobs have been going in the South.
They have been trying to unionize these transplant facilities without any success. They've been trying to, they wanted unionize these EV battery manufacturing facilities. I don't know how much success they're going to have there. They actually have more people in the kind of government and healthcare services area than they do in the automotive manufacturing space. So, you know, I understand the pressure that they're under, but I think the businesses have a better case, especially when you consider, when you do the math over the life of the contract with the profit sharing, how well did the workers do? And I think they did a lot better with profit sharing than they did with some sort of COLA adjustment.
There's your stage set for these negotiations that are now underway. Guys, thanks so much for the great conversation. We come back, we'll talk with freshman Congressman John James. This is Flashpoint on Local 4. There were 82 freshman members of Congress sworn in this past January. One of them was the Republican from Michigan's 10th District, John James, who hits the 6-month mark of his first term and does so by becoming in the second quarter the guy who, among all those freshmen, raised the most money for the next re-election campaign. So, John James, I guess congratulations are in order on that front.
Well, I very much appreciate that, but my focus has always been the people in my district, and frankly, I think there's way too much money in politics, which is why in the past I've made sure that we gave things to help people in the community, to help clothe the naked, feed the hungry, and help heal the sick and take care of veterans. And I'm just so proud to be in a position to represent Michigan's 10th congressional district, to actually now serve people who need help the most. So very proud of my team and very grateful to those who believe in me enough to invest in our campaign. And I don't aim to let you down. Thanks for your trust and support.
I know it's a thing that drives a lot of members crazy when they first get in and find out that they immediately have to start thinking about the next re-election cycle. Let's talk about the news of the week first. On Friday, very narrowly, the defense spending bill passed the House, but it did so by adding a lot of social issue restrictions on it that made it very unlikely to pass the Senate. I'm really curious about how you feel this. There's a 5% pay raise in there that I believe, as a former military man, you are definitely in favor of, and that the debate over these social issues kind of jeopardized that to the minor.
Yeah, I, as a combat veteran, someone who puts his country first, I hate the fact that both parties continue to fail the American people by using our servicemen and women as pawns for their cultural wars and social experiments. I'd like to get back to the day when we were one nation under God and our military was focused on fighting and winning our nation's wars. and getting back home safely. My focus in this NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, was taking care of Selfridge. And I'm so excited that we were successful in not only looking at how our supply chain can be stronger, as representing the 10th Congressional District, which is the nation's #1 manufacturing district with the best talent that the world has ever seen, but also made a provision for additional fighter jets for the military to produce, and then provision them specifically for the Air National Guard. We have to do everything that we can to fight for Selfridge, and I'm doing everything that I can right here to make sure that our voice is heard and that Selfridge is at the front of the list, not on the back.
You know, you and both of our state senators have spent an awful lot of time on Selfridge, and I'm really curious as to it seems to get passed over for a lot of sort of fighter programs or bomber programs. Some people in Washington, the DoD, seem to have a little bit of trouble finding a real identity for Selfridge, and yet here it's a base right on an international border. It seems odd that it often has to sort of sing for its supper.
Yeah, it's pure laziness of the bureaucrats here in D.C. who don't see the great value that a super base like Selfridge has that already houses a number of other branches. You look at California that has 4 to 5 fighter missions. New York has 4 fighter missions. And over the past 30 years, we've only lost fighter missions. Well, I was proud that one of my very, very first initiatives as a congressman was to lead a letter directly to Secretary Kendall, the Secretary of the Air Force, with the 3 names on the top being mine and Senator Stabenow and Senator Peters. Now, for those who may have been under a rock for the past few years, I ran against both of those individuals. But there's something that happens when it comes to Selfridge. There are no political parties when it comes to Selfridge. I'm proud as the congressman to lead the effort here, working with Senator Stabenow and Peters, working with our entire delegation, save one congressperson, and our governor, whose staff recently gave us a pat on the back for the testimonial I gave in rules to even get this initiative into the National Defense Authorization Act. So we're all on the same team when it comes to our national security and protecting Selfridge because of the great economic impact it has in the region and what it means for our national security. A really important component, obviously. I want to ask you about another defense issue, though, and that is spending on Ukraine. As somebody who, I'm basically a child of the Cold War, and I grew up on Army bases all over the world because of my father being a career military man. I'm still trying to square a Republican Party that doesn't seem to be all that eager to help defend against Russia. That's a weird place to be, to me at least. I'm really curious about how you feel about spending to help Ukraine in their war against a Russian invasion. Yeah, it's about balance, Devin. We absolutely have an interest in stopping the growing spheres of communist influence emanating from Moscow and Beijing. We absolutely have a commitment to our allies abroad, particularly in Europe, to make sure that communism does not spread further west. But we also have an obligation to our taxpayers. We also have an obligation to the American people to make sure that the Pentagon actually passes an audit, that they don't get a blank check of the hard-earned American dollars that are being taxed without any explanation. And the American people are also owed a mission. We're owed a mission from this administration to clearly articulate what the goals are, what the end state is, so they can come back to the American people and ask for their support. Isn't the goal kind of clear to get Russia to go back home? Well, the stated goal is to hold Russia accountable and to prevent the spread of communism into Europe. Well, that's great, but Devin, can you or your listeners or your viewers tell me the last time the United States won a war? It was 80 years ago. It was World War II. And since then, we've had bureaucrats in D.C. Who have allowed scope creep to jeopardize the lives and in the interests of Americans abroad. We must absolutely support the Ukrainians in their fight for freedom, and we must absolutely stand by our allies. But we must do so from a position of strength, making sure that we secure our supply chains, making sure that we're strong at home first, and make sure that the American taxpayer has an account for every single penny that they're sending abroad.
Let me ask you about the other news of the week. It was really interesting that all of the Michigan Republican delegation this past week announced its support for Donald Trump as the next Republican presidential nominee. Given the problems that the Republican Party had in Michigan in the last election, the disarray that right now is in the Michigan Republican Party, largely focused on battles over Donald Trump's influence, and a guy who is up to his eyeballs in legal trouble. Was this the right time to do that?
Well, I'm not going to comment on that, but I'll tell you what, I'm mostly focused on my district. I'm focused on the match for the district. And frankly, with what the Biden administration has been doing, we cannot have another Joe Biden term. My focus has been on making sure that we are not left behind in this EV transition. That we do have fighters in Selfridge, that we do address our housing issues, and that we protect Social Security and Medicare. I dropped a bill that will protect parents and also look after caregivers and public safety officers and nurses in opportunity zones. So yeah, people can now get wrapped around the politics. But what's that?
This is your Reignite Hope Act.
Yeah, that's my Reignite Hope Act. That's where I'm focused. And anybody who I support is going to be sure to support the initiatives that are important in my district.
But you said you didn't want to comment on the support for Donald Trump.
No, I'll comment on the support. The reason why I endorsed him is because he's most aligned with the district. When you look at how votes were aligned last cycles, Republicans are losing because they're losing touch with the people. And I'm not losing touch with the people. I'm focusing on the issues that are most important. And so when I talk about life issues, where my district is rape, incest, life of the mother, and respecting the rights of the states to make their own decision. That's the Supreme Court sent it down. And the president is aligned with that because it's aligned with my district. When I talk to the president about what's most important, I say we need to look out for housing. We need to look out for seniors. We need to look out for this EV transition. We need to bring fighters back to Selfridge. And I speak to him and I say I need support for my district. That's a very powerful position to be in. So I don't care what political party you're in. I'm going to be with people who are in the best position to help me take care of my district. That is my singular priority, not the personalities. We're staying mission focused, and that's what we're all about.
I got to get to a break, but I just want a little bit of clarity. Michiganders have seemed to make it clear where they stand on abortion. If you were in Congress and it came to, you were asked to vote on a national referendum or a national policy on abortion, would you do that, or should it remain left up to the states?
Thanks for that question. Pro-life organizations have fought for decades to have this pushed back to the states, and that's exactly where it is right now. The people of Michigan have spoken, and we've heard, and I said it from a very, very beginning, that we need to have compassion for women, and we need to listen to women. And women have made their voice heard loud and clear. We need to look out for exceptions like rape, incest, life of the mother. And we need to respect the fact the decision is back to the states. Now that people in Michigan have made their decision, it is my job as the representative to represent my district.
John James, it's good to talk to you. I really appreciate the time, and we'll catch up again soon, I hope.
Thanks, Devin.
You bet. Republican Congressman John James will continue with more. This is Flashpoint on Local 4. And that's going to do it for us. Thanks so much for being here. Meet the Press coming up next. British Open next weekend. We'll see you the following week for Flashpoint.